I'm here today to tell you a story about a long-standing love affair between human beings and the food that nourishes us. We come into this world hardwired to love our food, not just because food helps us to survive, but because food brings us pleasure. Who can forget the taste of popsicles in the summer in the backyard? Who can forget the taste of that soup that was made for you by someone who cared when it started to get cold outside? Through food, we learn about where we come from, who we are, and in many ways, who we want to be. But like many love stories, this is also a story of tragedy and betrayal. And I saw that betrayal up close a few months ago when I found myself watching an ad on television for a popular Antacid. This ad showed a mother, just like me, at a children's birthday party, and she was going to take a bite out of her hamburger when all of a sudden, the burger bit her back. You've seen this ad? Quite literally, the burger starts to eat this poor woman's face. And the byline for the ad is, when your favorite foods start to fight you, fight back fast by taking the antacid. Now, I was horrified by this ad. Firstly, because one of the first things I remember learning in medical school was that pain is a protective sensation. It helps us to avoid things that could cause damage to our bodies. And this ad was suggesting that we should medicate that sensation away and continue consuming the foods that are hurting us. But also, that ad disturbed me because of what it suggested about our modern-day relationship with food. What was once a loving, stable relationship has turned into the War of the Roses. If you are in your late 30s or older, you might remember this film with Kathleen Turner and Michael Douglas. A handsome young couple, they seemed to have it all, and then they started fighting, and they invested so much of their time, energy, so many of their resources in that fight that they lost everything. They lost their friends, their productivity in their jobs suffered. At the end of the movie, they even lost their lives. And I couldn't help but see some striking relationship parallels between the dysfunctional relationship in this movie and our modern-day dysfunctional relationship with food. We used to know our food intimately. Even if we didn't grow it ourselves, we probably knew the person who did grow it, or at least where it came from. We spent time with our food, in the kitchen, cooking it with care, serving it with pride. We tried not to waste our food. And in return, our food loved us back. It helped our children to grow and develop. It helped us to thrive and feel good about ourselves. And then we did something that our food could never forgive us for. We got really busy, and we outsourced the intimacy. We started paying strangers somewhere far away from us to grow, process, and package our foods. We allowed our foods to be stripped of their nutrients so they would last longer on a grocery store shelf. We allowed our foods to be pumped up with synthetic nutrients, colors, flavors, and more fat, sugar, and salt than we were ever meant to consume. We allowed our food to be caged and drugged and force-fed until its breasts got so big it couldn't walk to the water trough to get a drink. We basically allowed our food to be pimped out and sold for a profit. Now, if you were food, wouldn't you want a divorce? Is it any wonder then that our food is hurting us? Is it any wonder that we are in the midst of an epidemic of obesity that has never before been seen in the history of humankind? And this is an epidemic that threatens to bankrupt our nation and leave our children with a shorter life expectancy than their parents. It's a problem we urgently need to fix, and yet instead of trying to repair the foundations of our relationship with food, we just keep investing more time, energy, and resources in the fight against food. And the targets of our war on food change over time. For 10 years or more, we did everything in our power to eliminate fat from our diet. Now we're reading more and more about sugar and how sugar is a toxin and we should eliminate it from our diet, even if it means that we end up living on bacon and eggs. And one of the consequences of this targeted war on food is that people have become much more educated about what's in their food. But somehow, seeing food as a collection of nutrients made something so beautiful somehow seem less beautiful. We looked at a strawberry and we saw fiber and vitamin C, and we saw sugar, and we made a value judgment based on what we had read that we were supposed to be consuming more of or supposed to be eliminating from our diets. I'm not pointing fingers here. I saw food this way for many, many years, and I intimately know the thought process that happened to me before I would outsource our family's intimacy with food. It was the end of a long day. I was tired. The children were hungry, and the fast food takeout options just seemed endless, and they were so easy. They were quick, they were cheap, and they carried that illusion of happiness. But then something happened a few years ago that changed everything for me, that repaired my relationship with food. This is our middle son, Misha, when he was 2.5 years old. And I give this picture to my Stanford students as a role play exercise. And in this exercise, the tables are turned. They get to be the physicians, and I get to be the worried mother. It's not a huge character leap for me. I get a lot of practice. But inevitably, they tell me they see a rosy-looking child. He looks alert. He looks well-fed. He's feeding himself in a developmentally appropriate way. The word butterball sometimes gets mentioned. And then I tell them that a year passes, and I bring Misha in to see them for his 3-year checkup. And he looks like this. He was emaciated and pale. He complained of terrible tummy aches, but we couldn't figure out what was causing them. He was still smiling because children can be so brave even when they're sick. And this child, on many days, could not get up off of the couch to play with his brothers. But after 8 weeks of tests and worry, we had a diagnosis. Misha had celiac disease, an autoimmune food allergy to the gluten in wheat and a few other grains. And this is Misha after 6 months on a gluten-free diet. Now, I am not going to tell you guys that going gluten-free is the solution to all of our problems. I think we've seen too many times that the single nutrient solution is never a sustainable one. But I will tell you this. In the first 24 hours after Misha's diagnosis, the 24 hours when I cried and threw out a lot of bagels, I realized I had a choice to make. I could either mourn the loss of those bagels for the rest of Misha's childhood, or I could blow the lid off of this thing and turn it into the biggest party our household had ever seen. I started cooking again. From somewhere in my childhood memory bank, I remember my mother coming home from work and throwing a handful of chopped onions into some olive oil on the stove, and the whole kitchen would smell with the smell of dinner on its way. So I started to imitate her, and something magical began to happen. The children suddenly became interested in what I was doing in the kitchen. They wanted to be part of the process of cooking real whole foods, and they seemed to enjoy eating those foods. They became curious about where their foods came from, and even my pickiest eater decided to try things he would never have tried before. We went to farmers markets and experimented with new ingredients and new flavors. I rarely followed recipes because I knew that that was not going to be a sustainable way for me to cook on a day-to-day basis. But what I found was that the more I did it, the more I cooked, the easier it got, the quicker it got, and I started to feel really good about what came out of that kitchen. The children started to look at their food in a different way. Friends came into our home, and there were experiments with cake batters and other fresh ingredients. I realized that we were eating healthier, and yet we were enjoying our food more than we ever had before. I did have to reallocate a little bit of my time, but the upside was so great that I couldn't imagine ever going back. Our family had come together around food, and we were finally loving the foods that loved us back. Now, in retrospect, this adventure did so much more than redefine the way we ate. This adventure redefined the nature of the question from what are we supposed to be avoiding this week to what do we feel like eating this week. And what we ended up eating was really pretty satisfying. In fact, I have an anecdote for you. My children are being raised in what you might call a multi-faith home. We celebrate the Jewish holidays, we celebrate the Hindu holidays. They go to a Catholic school. That is not the punchline, but somebody at school asked Misha, tell me, does your family pray at home before you eat? And Misha shrugged his shoulders and said, we don't have to. My mom's a pretty good cook. Cooking had added so much value to our lives that I couldn't help but want to share this with others. And I thought to myself, if I could just let other parents be exposed to some of these fundamental principles that had helped me get started, maybe I could help them transform the way they were eating as well. You've got to love Stanford for thinking this was a good idea, but they supported me in the creation of a massive open online cooking course with a little bit of child nutrition sprinkled on top. And the course generated a community of tens of thousands of international parents who to this day share their recipes and share their stories of how cooking added value to their lives. Now, one of the best stories I remember hearing was from a mother in the class who said to me, last week I cooked dinner 3 times. That's 3 times more than I've cooked in the last 6 months. I just needed a reminder. So today, I'm going to offer you a gentle reminder. If you're tired of fighting your food, if you want to fix that relationship once and for all, I have something for you that'll outdo any marriage counselor or love expert in the book. And you probably have one in your kitchen cabinet already. So instead of leaving you today with a prescription for what to avoid or what to eat more of, I'm going to leave you with my wish for you. May the foods you eat be worthy of you, and may they be made with love. Thank you.